Karmelo Anthony is not going quietly into his 35-year prison sentence for murder.
He put his hands on me. I told him not to. He put his hands on me.
Now, a powerhouse defense team is fighting to undo the verdict that branded Karmelo Anthony a killer. What started as a track meet confrontation ended with a fatal stab wound and a murder conviction.
I know how it goes. I'm not alleged. Okay.
The case appears closed, but Anthony's new defense team is preparing a challenge that could put the entire verdict back under the microscope. We're on The Case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Stewart. Right now, Karmelo Anthony is currently living in a rural Texas medium security prison. It's about 3.5 hours south of Frisco, Texas. That is where Anthony used to live. It is where Anthony stabbed Austin Metcalf in the chest at a track meet, and it was a wound that killed Austin Metcalf. And of course, this all happened, and we've talked about this story a lot, after Karmelo Anthony ended up under the tent of Metcalf's team at this track meet, and he wouldn't leave. The state said that Metcalf then confronted Karmelo Anthony, that he shoved Karmelo Anthony, and Anthony responded with a knife that was in his backpack, striking Austin Metcalf and giving him an injury that the medical examiner says there is no way that Austin Metcalf would have survived. And the jury, it only took them 3 hours to determine Karmelo Anthony's fate, and it was that he was guilty of murder. But now, Karmelo Anthony has a high-profile team of lawyers who are preparing to challenge that verdict. We received an email from the Stand with Karmelo Coalition, and this email announced 6 lawyers will conduct a fresh, independent review of the trial record. It goes on to say, quote, "We recognize the profound loss suffered by one young man's family and the uncertainty facing another, and we extend our respect to everyone whose lives have been forever changed by these events." So this team of lawyers, they will be serving pro bono, according to the email. Now, we're going to go through what makes this team so high profile and potentially high powered in just a moment. But first, I do want to go through some of these new images that we have in this case.
I know how it goes. I'm not alleged. Okay.
This is body cam video from one of the first officers to confront Karmelo Anthony after he stabbed Austin Metcalf at this track meet. This body cam captures the moment that Anthony made this now infamous statement, quote, "I'm not alleged, I did it." And you heard it clear as day on that body cam. Now, the court has released a large amount of evidence that was shown to jurors during the trial, including body cam footage and surveillance video. Now, because cameras were not allowed inside the courtroom, the public is now only getting to see what the jury saw. Now, here is the only known video of the moment where Anthony stabs Austin Metcalf under the tent. And it's from a camera that was mounted on top of the football stadium where this track meet was going on in April of 2025. Now, the state argued that Karmelo had no reason to be under Austin's team's tent. Now, the defense argued that Karmelo knew someone there and he was welcomed under the tent. But what happens next is Austin Metcalf reportedly tells Karmelo Anthony to leave, and when Anthony didn't, words were exchanged, and Metcalf puts his hands on Karmelo and shoves him. And you can see, it's very blurry, but you can see that shove in the surveillance video. Now, that shove was met with a stabbing from Karmelo Anthony. He pulled a knife out from his backpack and stabbed Anthony in the chest. And again, it was a wound so severe, a stab wound to the heart, that the medical examiner said there is no way Austin Metcalf could have survived. In fact, the medical examiner said if there was an operating table right there with a surgeon, it is not likely that Austin Metcalf would have survived that injury. He died on the track. Karmelo, he ditched the knife and he ran. His defense argued it was because he was afraid for himself. He was just trying to get away from the situation. Now, here is more body cam video of what happened next when officers confronted him on the track.
So nothing on your person at all?
No, sir.
Nothing?
No, sir.
Mind if I reach in your pockets and stuff and all that? Nothing gonna stab me?
No, sir.
Okay.
I have value in my phone.
Raising.
Come on, I'm gonna get a little personal there, okay? Just to make sure.
My car's right there.
Okay. Yeah. You want me to get up now? Yeah. Come on. All right. The victim's gonna be underneath that tent over there, so I'll get medics. Memorial tent over there, guys. All right.
He put his hands on me. I told him not to. He put his hands on me.
What's happening right now? Victim is over here on the north end. They got staff standing to him right now. This is the alleged suspect. All right. Already? No. We searched them. We got nothing on him.
I don't know what happened.
423. Trackers have a negative CPR progress for what witness.
Raising.
You know that's the wrong thing.
Raising.
Come on, side over here or side? Up to you. It's up to you.
That's fine. This is closer.
Okay. Let me do one more little check of you, okay?
Yes, sir.
You don't mind for reaching your pockets, anything like that? You good?
You can.
Well, you're just wearing this one pair of pants?
No, I'm wearing some little underpants.
Well, yeah, but those that it's not pockets, these are your
No,
own
ma'am, I
pockets.
don't think so.
What's your name, man?
Carmelo Anthony, Karmelo.
430, show me out.
Okay.
Raising.
Have a seat here real quick, man. Watch your head. Let me check your hood here, buddy, okay?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'll tell you what, lean this way so you're not resting on your hands, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, see a little bit of blood on your hands there, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right.
402, I'm on scene.
So your first name is Karmelo?
Yes, sir.
Raising.
Karmelo.
Let's see, hold on one second.
Is he gonna be okay?
I don't know yet, man. Carmelo, C-A-R-A.
K-A-R.
K-A-R-M-E-L-O.
M-E-L-O.
Carmelo, what's your last name?
Anthony.
A-N-T-H-O-N-Y.
T-H-O-N-Y.
Where are you in?
I'm in 12th grade.
10th grade? You go to Emerson?
No, sir.
Where do you go? Centennial. Okay.
I'm in 12th grade.
12th grade?
Yes, sir.
Okay, no Centennial. All right, sit tight for me real quick, bud, all right?
Guys, real quick, running a business is tough enough, but why make it harder doing things manually or relying on dozens of apps that don't talk to each other? That is where our sponsor Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management platform with a full suite of integrated apps that seamlessly connect all your operations from sales and accounting to manufacturing and even shipping. Odoo can automatically generate professional, sleek-looking sales orders, invoices, and vendor bills, and it can automatically assign sales teams, send email updates through each sales stage, and even use AI to pull reports that help with your decision-making. For manufacturing, their apps can sync inventory with real-time production and purchase updates so you never run out of stock. And when it comes time for accounting, that is also fully automated. Odoo can create invoices, track expenses, and even summarize data with AI to save you hundreds of hours. And the best part, you can choose your apps and even build custom workflows so it is all fully tailored to your business's needs. Take your business to the next level by consulting with an Odoo expert today for free at odoo.com/OTC. Karmelo Anthony's trial lasted 4 days. When it came to the testimony, it took the jurors about 3 hours to find him guilty of murder. Then it was another 3 hours that same day, roughly, for them to determine that his punishment would be 35 years in state prison. It could have been as many as 99 years. Now, the day after his sentence, Karmelo Anthony filed a notice of appeal from prison, and he wrote in that notice of appeal that he doesn't have the money for an attorney. But that doesn't appear to be an issue any longer because he has this pro bono team of lawyers now in his corner. So let's go through this team of lawyers. According to the Stand With Karmelo Coalition, the team is led by Dallas Appellate Attorney Russell Wilson II, who once led the Dallas County District Attorney's Conviction Integrity Unit. And according to the DA's website, one of that unit's jobs is to send out, quote, mass notifications where systemic errors affected or potentially affected the judicial process. You also have Austin-based attorney Gary Bledsoe, who is the president of the Texas NAACP, and he's been in that position since 2001. And he is, quote, admitted to practice before the U.S. Supreme Court and the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Next, you have Michael Ware, who's a Fort Worth-based attorney and former prosecutor, and he's the executive director of the Innocence Project of Texas. He was inducted into the Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Hall of Fame last year. With them, civil rights attorney Brooke Clues, who is a former Houston public defender, and she is now chief of staff for high-profile civil rights attorney Ben Crump. And another high-profile lawyer on the team is Sean Daradia, who is based in Dallas, and he's had multiple clients acquitted in high-profile murder cases, and he serves as a TV legal analyst. And finally, you have trial lawyer Justin Moore. He's also based in Dallas, and his description reads, quote, he has represented clients in high-profile criminal and civil rights matters, including securing the acquittal of a teenager charged and falsely accused of capital murder. So it does seem to be a very high-profile team. The question, of course, becomes, what might they actually be able to do to overturn the conviction of Karmelo Anthony, and what happens next? Joining us now to talk more about this from Texas, criminal defense attorney Anthony Asso. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. So if you're a prosecutor on this case, you look at this lineup, how nervous are you that this conviction may actually not stick?
Well, as a prosecutor, hopefully you're not nervous, right? I mean, I think from a prosecutor standpoint, you should be bringing cases to trial that you feel the state has evidence to prove, right? And you've got to trust that your lying lawyers, the trial lawyers in that case, did what they were supposed to do, right? Which, in addition to trying to get the verdict they want and the sentence they want, is also making sure the record is clean so that the conviction sticks for decades to come.
And what happens now? I know that Karmelo Anthony filed a notice of appeal, and then we got the update here of who his attorneys are going to be on the appeals process. What do they do next?
Right. So it's just a timeline. You have to file the notice of appeal within a time period. And then from that point, they'll get a scheduling order of when the actual appeal is filed. And that at that point, the court will review it. They'll probably need to get a transcript, a trial record, and the court will have to go through that, and they'll make their decisions regarding the appeals after reviewing the record and both parties' arguments, both the state and the defense's arguments regarding the appeal.
Because post-verdict, we've seen so much debate from people who were just following this case to columnists of all different kinds, legal analysts, about the facts of the case and everything that went down in the trial. And then, now the body cam and surveillance video was released in the last couple of days. So people are looking at that too. But in an appeals process, like, what will Karmelo Anthony's team actually be looking at to determine whether or not he would get a new trial and whether this conviction could actually be overturned?
So they're going to be looking at the record itself, Chris. This isn't going to be a situation like much of the public is doing, where they're looking at, well, why didn't the defense argue this, or why didn't they argue that? What they're going to look at is really errors within the record, both constitutional errors and structural errors. So did the judge allow hearsay in against the defense's objection? Was there a jury charge instruction that was let in that shouldn't have been let in? I think we'll probably see an objection to the judge's ruling on the Batson challenge. The defense did object. They did make a Batson objection, and the judge overruled that objection. So I'm sure we'll see that as being one of the issues that the court rules on, in addition to a number of other issues, probably a sufficiency of the evidence argument, and then various other pieces of evidence that probably came in that the defense will re-urge their objection on the appeal.
Because there have been people who have looked at the jury selection process. We've heard the term Batson challenge over the last couple of days since this verdict came in. For people who are just kind of following along, may not be lawyers, what exactly is a Batson challenge, and what Karmelo Anthony's team would have to prove for that to be successful?
Sure. So in jury selection, you cannot make you can't strike somebody on the basis of gender or race. You have to have a gender or race neutral reason for striking that person. So in an instance of a trial, if the prosecution strikes a few, we'll use this case, for example, they strike a few black jurors, then the defense might think, hey, well, the prosecution struck black jurors because they're black. And so they can make a Batson challenge. The burden then shifts to the state to provide the court with race neutral reasons for having struck black jurors. And so in this case, I think the state argued that they struck these jurors because they were educators of young children or kids. And so they felt that they wouldn't be good jurors in this case because they might be more sympathetic to Mr. Anthony. And the court found that that was a sufficient race neutral reason and overruled the defense's objection.
When it comes to some of the work that this team of 6 attorneys and again very accomplished lawyers, it seems, when it comes to the work that they're going to do, because in the notice of appeal, Karmelo Anthony, says that he doesn't have any money, which makes sense. He's 18, 19 years old, and he is now an inmate in Texas State Prison, doesn't have a job, career on the outside of it. He had just graduated high school. Like, how does, assuming that this team, for all the prestige they have, they're doing this pro bono, and if it's like the full force of all their law firms looking into this, like, what does that get you in an appeal process as you go through the record compared to someone maybe more of someone who doesn't have the national recognition on their case and they're just kind of going through the appeals process, as I'm sure a lot of people who have been convicted of crimes end up doing?
Well, with a team like this, you should expect they're going to lift up every rug and they're going to look under every rock and make sure that no stone's unturned. And a lot of what they're doing, because it's a serious hurdle in an appeal, right? Because with these constitutional errors, sure, something might be wrong, but not only does the defense have to prove that something went wrong, a piece of evidence was let in, a juror was allowed to testify regarding certain conduct, an instruction got into the jury charge. They also have to prove that there was harm, that error caused harm, and but for that error, we would have or could have had a different verdict. And so it's a really high burden for a defendant on an appeal, but they're also preserving the appellate record for potential appeals down the line, post-conviction appeals like post-conviction writs of habeas corpus and things of that nature.
Who eventually, because obviously it was a jury of his peers, and I know people have debated the racial makeup. It was majority white, wasn't an all white jury, but a majority white jury that made this decision. The judge stands by the decision. Who, as they prepare the appeal process, like who eventually, or the group of people, are the ones who would determine whether or not this conviction sticks?
Well, it'll be the appellate court justices. And so they'll look back. First, the appellate lawyers for Mr. Anthony are going to have to make the arguments. They're going to have to raise these issues. The issues that they raise are going to have to be issues that were previously raised in trial for the most part, right? And that's why it's so important, like I talked about earlier with the prosecutors and keeping a clean record, it is crucial that the defense attorneys in this case make the objections when necessary, because they know they've got to preserve this record for appeal so that they can give the appellate lawyers the ammunition they need to make the objections to the appellate court. But ultimately, it will be the justices. They'll be looking at the rulings from the verdict by the jury as well as the rulings by the court and determine whether this conviction sticks. That is a really, the judge views the trial court's rulings and the jury's verdict in a very deferential manner. So it's really light, most favorable to the evidence that was presented in trial.
Because there's been a lot of criticism for just people who've been following along with this trial of the defense of Karmelo Anthony. You're a criminal defense attorney. I'm not. As you know, it is a really hard job and like kind of Monday morning quarterbacking, and in a situation as serious as this, it isn't fair a lot of times. But there is the decision that was made, and whatever went into that decision, it's kind of unclear of why Karmelo Anthony did not testify in his own defense, since he was, really the closest witness to what happened. And if you're alleging that you were afraid for your life and you needed to do this to protect yourself and all of that, I think jurors would have really liked to see that. First off, let's just talk about that decision in and of itself. Like, what did you make of the decision for Karmelo Anthony not to be on the stand?
Well, I agree with you, Chris. I think any juror is going to want to see that. And I'm sure the defense probably went over that issue during jury selection and weeded out or tried to weed out the jurors that would hold that against the defendant if he didn't testify. But people slipped through the cracks. And so I think in this day and age, if you're arguing self-defense, people want to hear, well, what made you so scared that you felt the need to use a knife in a fist fight, which it wasn't even really a fist fight according to the testimony we heard. So I think it's that judgment call is something the general public may never have the true insight on, because we weren't with the defense team. You've got to assume that they were preparing Mr. Anthony to testify for trial. And if they didn't feel like he would be a good witness, or they felt that he would do himself more harm than he would benefit, then you've got to make a judgment call as a defense attorney. And in certain instances, defendants just don't want to testify. So there's a lot that goes into that decision. But again, I agree with you. I think in this kind of case where the facts aren't necessarily on your side, you have prosecution witnesses talking about provocation, you as the defendant really need to get up on the stand and tell your side of the story.
And I don't know if this is what happened. I don't know if when they went into a back room and they're deciding it, maybe it was Karmelo Anthony who said,
Yep.
I just don't want to do this. I don't think I need to. We're unclear. But when it comes to the appeals process, if the defense team looked at Karmelo and said, you should not testify in your own defense, and maybe that was the wrong decision, like, is that something that could be made into the appeals process, that he just got bad advice in that situation? It was a bad strategic decision and things could have been a lot different had he taken the stand.
So no, Chris, it wouldn't. That would be an ineffective assistance of counsel claim that would likely be brought up during the habeas corpus part of an appeal. But assuming that we were there, that's probably not going to be a winner argument, because the attorney's going to provide an affidavit and state that here was our strategy based on the evidence that we had, the evidence that was in at trial, and our woodshedding in preparation of the defendant. We did not feel that it was the best strategic decision for him to testify. That's different than if the defendant wanted to and they forced him not to, right? Because in the end of the day, the defendant has the absolute right to go to trial. They've got the absolute right to testify in their defense. And so if they didn't provide him that opportunity, then that would be a cognizable claim for an ineffective assistance of counsel argument.
Because I'm sure you go into a prison and you talk to people about how their trials went. A lot of people probably weren't thrilled with their defense with just the outcome of how it went. Like, what is the bar when it comes to ineffective assistance of counsel? Like, what does that actually look like in effective appeals claims?
It's an unfortunately really low bar. I think that there's a case where a defense attorney was asleep during trial and was not found to be ineffective. Not found to have provided ineffective assistance of counsel. So, but on the less extreme side of things, as a defense attorney, you've got to make judgment calls based on your experience and based on what's been put into evidence before a jury. And so the courts really do provide a lot of deference to the decisions made by the lawyers. And so it's a really high bar. It's hard to overcome that, which is why it's really important for any appellate lawyer to make sure that there's a distinction in their argument of was he advised not to testify and chose not to, or was he truly not provided the opportunity to testify? And I don't think we have the latter in this instance. I'm pretty sure probably that he was advised not to testify by his lawyers and took their advice.
When it comes to, so 35 years in prison is the full sentence. He'll have to serve like 17 and a half.
Yes.
How long does the appeals process, like for this case, like how long are we looking until you kind of see the arguments made and whether there could be a decision on whether or not maybe they find something we don't know, but I guess how long does this appeals process typically take?
The appeals process on a 35-year sentence can take a really long time. Now, there's stages of the appeal process. There's the direct appeal, and then there's the post-conviction appeal. And so the direct appeal is a lot quicker than the post-conviction appeal. When the appellate court affirms the trial court's decision, then the case that's deemed a conviction, and then the defendant under Texas law would be entitled to file a post-conviction writ of habeas corpus under 1107. That process takes a lot longer because in that process, it actually allows the parties to investigate and create a record. They can get affidavits from new witnesses. They can get affidavits from witnesses that may have provided the defense evidence that the defense chose not to use in trial. They can get affidavits from the defense attorneys themselves where they're explaining the strategy behind their decisions in trial. And so you build a lot larger record. That investigation takes time. And you can file, in certain instances, you can file more than one writ of habeas corpus. So that can take decades.
So even, I mean, I know, like, let's just say he was out in 17 and a half years. I mean, how likely is it that he's out before his appeal process could even go the full length?
On a case like this, it's probably, I mean, 17 and a half years is a long time for any case.
Right.
Because that 17 and a half years he will do day for day. So it's likely that he will exhaust his appeals before that. before that date comes. Once that date comes, once you're paroled out, then the issue sort of becomes a moot. And you don't have, the court no longer has jurisdiction to hear the appeal. So it's a possibility that if the appellate court affirms the decision or the ruling, the jury verdict, and it goes into habeas proceedings, that could take a very long time. So it sort of just depends on a case-by-case basis.
And what did you make of it? So I think it was between 5 and 99 years he could have received as a sentence. He gets 35. Just knowing criminal defense in Texas, and this was a case where he's in this confrontation. He doesn't have any sort of a previous criminal record. What did you make of the 35 years for Karmelo Anthony?
I think it's a really stiff sentence for a kid that committed a crime at 17. The caveat to that is a 17-year-old lost his life over what the jury's determined to be a really senseless act. And so but that's three and a half decades, Chris. I mean, the kid, it's more than twice the kid's lifetime. And so I think it's a really high verdict. And I'd like to understand more what the defense's sentencing preparation looked like in a case like this. Because,
and that was one thing that stood out to me was, it was 3 hours or so to the guilty verdict. And then I was thinking, as we were kind of waiting for information to come out, it's like, okay, so maybe tomorrow they do the punishment part of it, let everybody get a breath, but they go right into the punishment phase for Karmelo Anthony. I mean, it felt like within, the hour, his mom is on the stand pleading for mercy from the jury. And then 3 hours or so after that, they come back with the 35-year number. Is that typical in Texas to kind of go that quickly from verdict to sentence within the day?
It's a possibility. Yeah, it can happen in any district court. And that's really just a judge by judge situation. If I was in the defensive situation, or if I was a judge, I would be inclined to probably break for the day and have the parties come back for sentencing the next day to give the defense time to regroup. That being said, you're using jurors' time. People have just spent a number of days listening to pretty gruesome evidence, and they're away from their families, they're away from their work, and judges have the responsibility of getting cases to verdict expediently while preserving the rights of the defendant as well as the state's rights in these cases. So you do see courts jump right in from guilt, innocence, and a punishment. And as a defense attorney, you have to be ready for the bad news and the one-word verdict, and turn right around, put your game face on, and argue why the jury shouldn't sentence your client to a term of a large number like 35 years.
Yeah, I mean, again, mid-50s. You think of the kid, he's 17, he just graduated high school, mid-50s on the way out. But then, for the Metcalf family, Austin's never coming home. Very, very sad case in Texas.
You wonder, and I've seen this in jury verdicts, right, where a jury will send a meaning behind their verdict, right? And so they can't really consider parole, but they were probably made aware that parole, that the defendant would have to do half the time before he was eligible. And so you wonder if they took that into consideration and saying, we'll make him do 35, he'll do his lifetime, he'll do the victim's lifetime. Just something that kind of crossed my mind as we're here talking about numbers.
Yeah, no. That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that yet, and we'll see what happens. This appeal process, certainly a high powered team, but what impact will it make in the long run? We'll see. Anthony Asso, criminal defense attorney out of Houston, Texas. Thank you for taking the time to be with us here on Law&Crime. It's great to be with you.
Chris, always a pleasure. Thanks.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and we are also now streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.